Good afternoon, everybody, and good evening to those joining from Europe, and good morning to anybody who may be joining from the West Coast. My name's Brian Whitmore. I'm a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center, and I'm also the editor and coordinator of our paper series, Russia Tomorrow, Toward a New Paradigm. This is a series that we launched last year under the direction of Ambassador John Herbst, director of the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center. The series seeks to illustrate various aspects of Russian politics and foreign affairs and to explain what has changed or what has not changed since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Today, we are launching the 9th paper in our series, Russia's Future Rulers by Mikhail Zygar. This paper looks at the intertwined topics of generational change and nepotism in the Kremlin elite. Today's author, Mikhail Zygar, of course, requires little introduction. He's the author of several best-selling books, including All the Kremlin's Men Inside the Court of Vladimir Putin, War and Punishment, Putin's Zelensky in the Path to Russia's Invasion of Ukraine, and the recently published The Dark Side of the Earth, Russia's Short-Lived Victory Over Totalitarianism. Mikhail is also a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center, and I will now turn the floor over to Mikhail for a 10-minute presentation, which will be followed by a panel discussion. Mikhail, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you for your introduction, and that's a great honor for me to be a part of this presentation and to write this report for you. And yes, that's a very complicated question. What is the new generation of Russian leaders? Who are going to be the generation of Putin's successors? And I'm trying to analyze what is happening right now, and definitely I'm not giving the answer to that question, who is going to be Putin's successor, because we know that Putin is not going to pick his successor while he's alive. He is going to stay in power as long as he's alive. So I'm not going to give you the answer who is going to be the next, but I'm going to analyze what is happening right now and who are the favorite bureaucrats in Putin's inner circle. What is happening right now? How he is changing the elites right now? Because definitely we have seen that the process has started, and during the current presidential term, Vladimir Putin is going to get rid of the old guard, or the old generation of those people who were very close to him, who have been very close to him during the recent 25 years. And that's an obvious process. Last year it has started, and the influence of all those mighty monsters who have been in power or very close to Vladimir Putin for so many years, their influence is on decline. Last year he fired the omnipotent Nikolai Patrushev from the very important position of the Secretary of Security Council, and instead of promoting his son, his heir apparent, Dmitry Patrushev, to the highest position in Russian government, as it was expected by many analysts and by Nikolai Patrushev himself, he promoted Patrushev Jr. only to the minor and more symbolic ceremonial position of Vice Prime Minister. Just the same, we saw that the influence of another important personality, Yuri Kovalchuk, the person who used to be considered the second in command, unofficially was called the Russia's only oligarch, because he is the only person who really owns and controls most of Russian non-governmental media. He's probably the closest friend of Vladimir Putin, and he was also trying to promote his son, his heir apparent, to the position of CEO of Gazprom or Rosneft, but instead his son Boris Kovalchuk was appointed only as the head of accounting chamber, which cannot be considered to be the real promotion. That's the position that has always been considered as the honorary pension for the seasoned bureaucrats, but not the position that could be the starting point for the young and aspiring leader. But instead, we see that a bunch of new names are being promoted and are becoming more and more influential in Putin's inner circle. Does it mean that meritocracy has its place in Putin's Russia? The clear answer is no, because no, he is not picking the brightest. He's not picking the most effective. He is picking the loyal ones, and it's clear that, and it's obvious that he started promoting the members of his own family or the people who are close to his family, those people he trusts the most. And probably one of the most curious figures in new Russian elite is his cousin, or the daughter of his first cousin, whose name is Anna Tsivilova. She's probably the most remarkable figure in Russian elite. Her career was skyrocketing last year because she started from being a modest wife of the governor of Kemerovo. Then she started running the only Russian charitable NGO in charge of all the support of war veterans, families of soldiers fighting in Ukraine, and so on and so forth. So she was made in charge of huge amount of money, and then she was promoted to be the Deputy Minister of Defense, which is a very serious position, because obviously de facto, Vladimir Putin is working as his own Minister of Defense. So his cousin, Anna Tsivilova, is one of the closest people to him, who is in charge of huge sums of money in the Ministry of Defense. At the same time, she managed to get her husband promoted. And her husband, Sergei Tsivilov, the one who used to be Kemerovo governor, now is working as another member of Russian government. He's the Minister of Energy. Another important figure to watch during the upcoming months or maybe years is the person whom you've definitely noticed in recent months. Kirill Dmitriev, the person who started working as a mediator in the negotiations between the United States and Russia, who obviously was one of those who organized the first talks in Saudi Arabia, and who is still very active. And there is a huge difference between this self-appointed informal minister of foreign minister of new future Russia, as definitely Kirill Dmitriev wants to be wants to be appointed as the real new foreign minister, but it won't happen that fast. But there is a huge contrast between Dmitriev and the old generation of Russian diplomats, like Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, or Putin's chief foreign policy advisor Yuri Ushakov. The old seasoned diplomats are very passive. They lack any initiative. They are not working as real diplomats, as real negotiators. They are only they can only execute those orders given by Vladimir Putin. But Kirill Dmitriev is quite different from them. He is trying to promote his own agenda, and he manages to do that because of his proximity to Putin's younger daughter, Katerina Tikhonova. He is considered to be one of her closest friends, and probably sometimes he is nicknamed the wallet of Katerina Tikhonova. So that is also the person to watch, because he's got a very interesting background. He used to study in Stanford and Harvard. He used to work in America for many years. At the same time, he was born in Kiev, so he can portray, and he successfully does that. He portrays himself as the person with real knowledge of Ukraine, because of the fact that he was born in Soviet Ukraine in the Soviet period. Few more important surnames to mention. Alexei Dumin definitely is not the member of the family, but as close as any member of family could be. He used to be the personal assistant and the bodyguard of Vladimir Putin for so many years. He has the reputation of the person who once, working as a bodyguard, saved Vladimir Putin from the bear. And recently he was promoted to another shadow position, very interesting position that is called Shadow Minister of Defense. He's working in the presidential administration, supervising actually the same tasks and the same issues as the real Minister of Defense. And for many years now, Alexei Dumin is seen as one of the potential candidates for the position of the future successor of Vladimir Putin, but definitely he's not going to be hinted as one during the upcoming years, because as I've already mentioned, there is a consensus in Russian political elite that Putin is not going to name any names within years or maybe decades to come, because he is going to stay. The last trend I would like to highlight in the beginning of my presentation is that we see that because of the war, the rules are changing and the mood in Moscow is definitely changing. It's harder and harder to pretend that war is not happening. Russian elite cannot do that. That attitude is not longer tolerated. And the more the war continues, the more Putin is trying to make everyone work for the war, as once Joseph Stalin used to say, everything for the front, everything for the victory. That's the new slogan of Russian political elite. And definitely we are going to see more purges and more trials and more shifts inside Russian political elite. The recent suicide of former Minister of Transportation, Roman Starovoyt, is another example of that. That moral atmosphere in Kremlin and in Moscow is changing. Everyone sees that, and everyone understands that life is not going to be the same as it was before the war, or even as it was before the current presidential term.
Okay, thank you, Mikhail, for that presentation. And I would urge everybody to read this paper. It's an excellent paper. I should know, I helped edit it. I want to now introduce our panelists. Evelyn Farkas is the executive director of the McCain Institute. She's also served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia, Ukraine, and Eurasia in the administration of former US President Barack Obama. And Anton Barbashin is the co-founder and editorial director of Riddle Russia. I'm going to take my prerogative as the moderator and ask the first couple of questions. Mikhail, I want to get the ball rolling with a very, very broad question. Your report touches on two very broad themes. One, generational change, and two, nepotism. Now, generational change can sometimes lead to political change. We saw this most famously with the rise of the post-Stalin and post-World War II generation in the Soviet Union that produced Mikhail Gorbachev. But nepotism, on the other hand, tends to calcify an elite. It's often a hindrance to political change. How do you see this rising elite in terms of its political orientation as opposed to the older generation? Should we expect change, or should we expect more of the same, or is it too early to say?
You know, actually, I love parallels between Soviet Union and current Putin's Russia, as well as parallels between, for example, late Stalinism and current Putinism, because there are a few very important parallels, but at the same time, you cannot ignore the fact that current Russia is so much more cynical than Soviet Union used to be. There is no ideology, there is no faith. It's clear that even those in power, even those who run state propaganda or run state-owned corporations, or even those people in the government, they do not seriously believe in everything they are supposed to say. So, and definitely when we see that President Putin is appointing his relatives, his or kids of his closest friends as the key managers of the state corporations and of the government, it does not remind even that strange meritocracy that existed in the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was known for promoting the gray faces, the people without ambitions, without initiative, people who were not considered, not seen as a threat by their superiors. But now we see that the same trend is so exaggerated in current Russia. The only real goal of Vladimir Putin is to stay safe. He tries to get rid of anyone who is bright, of anyone who is potentially risky in terms of a desire for change. So yeah, he is trying to make sure that the change is not needed by the new generation. At the same time, and that's his own belief. That's something he strongly believes in. That doesn't mean that the change won't come, because definitely I'm strongly convicted that I'm convinced that he remains the only person in Russia who needs this war, who started this war, and who is willing to continue it by all means. With Putin gone, the consensus would be completely different. So yes, even that cynical generation of those people picked by him to continue and to help him and to continue the war, they are going to behave in a completely different way the moment he's gone.
Yeah, sticking with this kind of with a related theme. I mean, Russian court politics is notoriously clannish, right? Sometimes those clans are tied to beliefs. Sometimes those clans are tied to values, but more often they're tied to very, very cold financial interests. Do you see clans emerging among the rising elite? Like we had in their parents' generation of court politics? And to what degree do they resemble those of the previous generation? Or to what degree are they different? I mean, where you have court politics, you're going to have clans. Do you see any emerging right now?
I wouldn't say that the new generation is strong enough to form their own clans. So they are trying to work within the previous structure, uh, probably with one minor exception, and that minor exception is the it's not yet a clan. It's that's some kind of sleeping clan. They're trying hard not to show that they exist, but that's the potential clan of Sergei Kiriyenko, the person who is in charge of the personal in the domestic policy in Kremlin, but he is in charge of picking all the governors of Russia, and he has been doing that for the last almost 10 years. So most Russian governors are trained by Kiriyenko and his team. They were selected by him. So in a way, they are supposed to be loyal to the person who has been training them. But they are not acting as a tribe. They are not acting as a clan. And it's clear that the moment when Kiriyenko shows his ambition to have his own team, he's going to be demolished. He's going to be kicked out of the Kremlin administration. One more important thing: most Russian clans are temporary. They switch sides, they merge, they start fighting the next day after they merged. So there is nothing eternal.
Great, thank you. And I love that concept of the sleeper clan, Mikhail. And maybe we'll follow up on that a little bit later. But now I want to turn to our panelists. I've been talking enough. Evelyn, you served at DoD, of course. Did you have any thoughts about the national security implications of Mikhail's findings? And also, of course, feel free to direct any questions or make any remarks regarding Mikhail's paper or presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Brian, for the opportunity. Thank you to the Atlantic Council team. Thank you, Mikhail, for a fantastic piece of work. I read the whole thing with great fascination. It's almost like reading People magazine, it's very gossipy, all the intertwined families and people. And if you've been following Russian politics long enough, you find it interesting and some of these personalities. I guess the thing that sprung out to me was that this is not a guarantee for economic success for the future of Russia. And it doesn't indicate either any kind of strategic thinking. There was only one individual, I don't know now if it was Dmitriev, I think it was Dmitriev, who has the experience living in the United States and so understands our mentality, which of course would be useful to somebody at the high levels in the Russian Federation. So I wonder, maybe this would be a question for Mikhail also, but I wondered about how much these people understand about the world and the way that others think, and then also how much do they understand about the Russians that they would be making decisions about. And on one level, maybe you could say, well, it doesn't really matter. But at the end of the day, we know that Vladimir Putin was shaped by what he saw and what he heard from his parents and other people around him as he was growing up in Russia. He understands viscerally, again, maybe he doesn't remember it as much because he was young, but he understands what it is not to have wealth, He understands what it is to fight your way up. He understands many things that these young people never experienced. And if they haven't gone, if all they've done is vacation in the French Riviera or what have you, they will not know enough about the rest of Russia and the challenges that people face in other parts of Russia. And that, to me, as a national security professional, is a weakness among leadership, because we know that even in an autocracy like Russia's, that the leader has to have a sense of what it is that might motivate or keep the country together besides raw force, which of course we're not in Soviet times, so we're not really exactly in the Stalinist era. So I guess I wonder how these young people would even be able to govern given their lack of experience with the world, with their own country, and strategic thinking, whether there's strategic thinking among these individuals.
It's a great question.
I sort of have a question for Mikhail in there.
Yeah.
Raise more questions for me. I'm not an expert on this, but I certainly thought about the corruption, all the weaknesses that it would entail.
Thank you, Evelyn. That's a very important issue, but it's usually viewed from the completely different angle from Moscow. Because yes, when the war has just started, Russian elite was in panic. They were sure that that was the catastrophe and Russian economy was doomed to fail. And that was a huge shock. But that shock is over. Russian big business or people in the Russian government, those who are in charge of the economy, were panicking and stopped panicking because they see that Russian economy managed to survive, that they were sure that Russia would not be able to sell its oil and gas, and that didn't happen. They expected the real catastrophe with ruble, with Russian currency, and that didn't happen. Even according to the International Monetary Fund, Russian economy is not stagnating right now, and the way how they restructured the economy, the way how they spent everything for the military-industrial complex, in a way satisfies a lot of people, because due to the international sanctions, all the money are locked inside the country. The economy is overheated, but a lot of people are getting wealthier and wealthier. A lot of regions, or few regions that used to be depressive and poor during the post-Soviet period, because they were focused on producing weapons. They were the major military-industrial plants were located in all those regions, and therefore they were depressive in the 90s. But now they started flourishing because of new money, new state contracts, the need for new labor and production of new weapons. So in a way, Russian depressive regions of Russia are being revitalized by this war economy. And a lot of people in Russia are sure that Russia is not isolated. Russian political elite is sure that Russia is not isolated because they feel that at least the global south, at least India and China and Brazil and all the BRICS countries are not against Russia. So it's for them. That's not the Soviet Union 2.0, because in the Soviet period, Russia was cut off the technologies, and that was the huge disaster for that was the reason for the collapse of one of the reasons of the collapse of Soviet economy. But Russia now has the access to technologies from China, for example, and it's not, they were expecting it to be really bad, and now they feel that Putin managed to outplay the West, and they are not expecting Russian economy to fail. Unfortunately, the structure of Russian economy and the amount of natural resources guarantees that Russia can feed its army and police and security services and prison system and even bureaucracy, not caring about the rest of the population. They don't care if the rest of the population are going to produce GDP, are going to start small businesses, or if there is any kind of middle class, they don't care, because selling oil and gas and metals is enough to pay salaries to army and bureaucrats and policemen. So that's the psychological and economical trap of Russia. And they are pretty confident that they know how to deal with it. And I think that the new cynical generation knows much more about the West and how to deal with the West, how to work with the United States. For example, the head of Russian Central Bank, Elvira Nabiullina, the person who is not considered to be a hawk. On the contrary, she is one of the most liberal members of Putin's administration, and she was a few years ago. She was the fellow and the participant of Yale Global Fellows Program. And just last week, we heard from another news from Russia that Yale University was declared the undesirable organization by Ministry of Justice, which is weird. Actually, any collaboration with undesirable organization is a crime in Russia. So basically, they have to accuse the head of the central bank in state treason. Obviously, they won't do that. Obviously, Elvira Nabiullina erased every mention of her months spent in Yale from her CV, from from the website of Russian Central Bank. But she has that experience. And a lot of people who work in Russia, a lot of business leaders in Russia who are working right now have that experience. And I'm really worried about that. I think that's a misfortune, because a lot of people who were willing to flee Russia in 2022 were not given that possibility. A lot of businessmen, a lot of bright personalities who were not supporting the war and were considering the possibility to leave Russia had to go back, because their bank accounts were frozen, because the first reaction to the beginning of the war was amazing in terms of the the free world unified behind Ukraine, and the free world unified in support of Ukraine, and that was the greatest accomplishment of the West. But at the same time, there was probably no strategy what to do with Russia. And that brought a lot of specialists, that pushed a lot of specialists back to Putin, back to Moscow, and they are working right now. They are being brainwashed, or they are just very cynical because they think that there is no real difference between working in the West and working in Russia.
Thank you, Mikhail. I want to remind those in our virtual audience that you can ask a question to Mikhail or to any of the panelists by going to askac.org. That's askac.org. And Mikhail, I just wanted to drill, if I can jump in here just for a minute before I turn to Anton, drill down on something Evelyn said. That's just the different experiences that the current generation of Soviet rulers, the Putin generation, if you will, which came up in the Soviet Union, of course, and the current generation, which were raised in this very, very, privileged way, spending their vacations in the south of France, as Evelyn memorably noted there. Do these different experiences lead to different attitudes?
I'm sure. Yeah, I think these are two universes. They are completely different. Like, yeah, definitely people with Soviet background, people who were born and raised in the Soviet Union and spent most of their lives in the Soviet Union are mentally completely different. We must remember that Putin is the person who spent most of his life in the Soviet Union. He was 40 when Soviet Union collapsed. So the biggest part of his life, even till now, was in the Soviet Union during the Cold War. He is the child of the Soviet culture, the Soviet. It's not ideology. He is one of the last Soviet generations, which was completely skeptical. He never believed in communism. He believed in. As the person who has always been fascinated by pretending to be a spy, he believes that to lie is a virtue, that you need to lie every time to deceive your enemies, to deceive everyone, you need to hide your real thoughts, you need to pretend all the time. That's the only thing almost everyone in Soviet Union did. They were pretending all the time. The new generation is somehow different. They didn't have that decades of Soviet hopelessness. So they were not traumatized by that life as a dead end itself, but they are cynical in some different way. They have that experience of traveling to the West. A lot of them worked in the West. They some of them got education in the West, and they came to that cynical conclusion that probably it's, in a way, it's better, but it's much more competitive than working in Russia. It's much easier to work in Russia. So they made that very cynical choice to work for Putin because they, just one little example. Most of them, when Soviet Union was collapsing, were members of Komsomol, of Youth Communist League, or even members of the Young Pioneer Organization, which is the equivalent of Boy Scouts, which was equivalent of Boy Scouts in the Soviet Union. So before 1991, they were fed with that communist propaganda, and they were told all the stories about bright communist future and Lenin and so on and so forth. And then just overnight, the teachers changed the attitude and told them, okay, forget it, we were lying to you, communism does not exist, there is no Lenin. Now, like, probably we should believe in God, or we're going to build the democracy. It's a completely brand new world. And when you hear that as a teenager, that affects you a lot. You learn only one thing. You should not believe in anything, not to be deceived, not to be cheated by the adults. And that was their first lesson. They know that they should not believe in any values. That's something very important about the new cynical generation of Russian bureaucrats. I mean, that's not characteristic of only Russian politicians, Russian bureaucrats. I think that's a widespread disease in Eastern Europe, in Western Europe, in some Western countries. The idea that values do not exist is becoming more and more popular, but that's a pandemic in Russia today.
So it's the nihilistic generation. We're going to bring Anton into here. Apologies, Anton, we took a while to get to you. You've long been a close follower of Russian politics and foreign affairs. What jumped out to you in Mikhail's paper and in the presentation? And feel free to comment or ask any question you want here.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. I remember it was, I think, 2018 when basically there was a lot of talk in Russia that Putin is going to be changing a lot of people. There's going to be a new generation stepping in. And since then, there was always sort of speculation who's the next guy. Dumin came up and many other figures. Kirill Shavalov was there for a while. But from reading the report, essentially what I get from the biographies is the fact that most of them, were not able to make it. So basically, you have some of the family members, the girls, Putin's daughters. So they showed them a couple of times. They did a couple of interviews, but they're not kind of moving openly directly. If you're talking about Kirill Dmitriev, I mean, it's been known and reported that he was not able actually to be like the actual part of the Russian negotiation team, and Ushakov sidelined him. We know like Dumin, who was supposed to be the biggest of them, is basically again sidelined to a position that most likely he does not enjoy very much. Some of the people, the kids of Rotenberg, Roman, I think he's having now some troubles, professional troubles. So my question, I guess, here is that if the goal was to actually promote the new generation that are sons of the elite, why didn't they actually do it? Why didn't they just go and put them into the positions and promote them to the other, to the other, to the other? So basically now we have just a few exceptions, and the rest are somehow kind of living the same life as most other Russian bureaucrats. They get lucky, they get promoted, they get sidelined, and the majority of people we're seeing now taking government positions are either related to Rostec or come from Kirienko's teams. So is it fear? Can Putin be kind of fearing to promote them that openly because other elite members would not like it, because the public will react, or maybe it was not that big of a priority and they just kind of used what was possible to give some of them some kind of presence within the governing structures? Thank you.
Thank you. You're right. That's not his priority. He's not caring about raising the new generation and like cherishing and training another team that is going to sideline him one day. He doesn't want that, and in a way, he is. At the same time, he needs some people to work. He needs some people to rely on. So he needs the bureaucratic machine to continue working. And you cannot make the son of your closest friend an effective bureaucrat just appointing him to some major position. Boris Kovalchuk, when his father wanted him to be appointed as CEO of Gazprom or Rosneft, had some kind of probation period. He was sent for a minor position in Kremlin administration, and there was a period of waiting. Everyone was watching and guessing what was going to happen. And a lot depended on the behavior of Kovalchuk. And what did he do? He didn't show up. He didn't even come to his new office in Kremlin because he was so offended by that minor position. He thought that that's not the position he wanted, so he didn't start working, and that's that's the reality with a lot of those Kremlin Nepo babies. They have some kind of background. They have strong parents. They have a lot of resources, but they don't need to be super bright. They don't need to be to have initiative. But when they do nothing at all, when they spoil everything they touch. That means that they don't pass. So that's the difference between most of them and, for example, Anna Sivilova, who is who showed herself, who proved herself as some kind of effective manager, and that's why she was she was promoted 3 times during the same year. But yes, at the same time, we know that the current period is not the final stage of that shift. Putin is not going to leave his office in the end of this presidential term. He is not going to depart this year or next year. He is just in the beginning of the process, and he is not in a hurry. He's not in a rush. He is going to replace Sergei Lavrov and Yuri Oshakov with someone else. But why change? Why do you need to do something today if you can do that not even tomorrow, but in a week, and you can wait and see what's going to happen? He's in a way, he is sure that he is the most experienced politician in his country and globally. He thinks that there is no competition, and so he can wait. He thinks that the time is on his side. He can outmaneuver anyone because he doesn't have to ask parliament or parliamentary majority or public opinion for anything. He can make very quick changes, and there is always enough time to do that.
Thank you, Mikhail. We got some questions coming in from the audience. Before I turn to them, I just want to see if Anton or Evelyn had any last remarks before we went to audience questions. No? Yes? Jump in if you would like to. Okay.
No, I think we should give the audience the time.
All right, let's go to the audience. All right, we got a question from Colleen Collins. She says, what about Putin's daughters? Are they serious players in the Kremlin power game? Could one of them take power after Putin's death? That's, of course, in reference to Putin's 2 daughters, Maria Vorontsova and Katerina Tikhonova. How about that, Mikhail? I know you devoted an entire section of the paper to the daughters, but here, have at it.
No, they are not going to take the power. They were not prepared for that. They cannot have that ambitions. They he has spent so many years trying to hide them from the public opinion. He did not prepare them for any public office or for anything. So the new phenomena is the fact that they dared to speak up, and they are important because they are being used by other people, and they could be effective leverage. They can help a lot of people to earn money. They can help a lot of people to be promoted, and they are very influential in that sense. But they don't have that. They don't have talent. They don't have education. They cannot challenge anyone. They can only join the camp of those people. Like I'm sorry for another historical parallel, but Tatiana Dyachenko, daughter of late Russian President Boris Yeltsin, didn't have her own political ambitions and didn't have any talents and didn't have like the idea of becoming Russian president or even the politician did not cross her mind. But she was very effectively used as the instrument by other people, including Boris Berezovsky, and she became the instrument to bring Vladimir Putin to power. So as just as her, Ekaterina Tikhonova and Maria Vorontsova are important because they probably are going to be used in the process of new elite making, but they are not to be considered as the political figures themselves.
So like Dichenko, they're basically conduits to the body, if you will. Great. Got a question from Tommy Banks. He said one additional parallel to the Soviet times comes to mind: the reluctance to give up power in rising gerontocracy that led to a quick succession of aged leaders who did not hold their positions for long. Is Putin's political class in a similar danger? I mean, this is again this notion of this ossifying elite that we saw in the Brezhnev period of zastoy or stagnation. Do you see that repeating itself, Mikhail?
Should I tell you that the popular gossip in Moscow and in Kremlin, they love discussing that the same process is happening in America. They are not looking at themselves. They love comparing Washington D.C. to Moscow in Soviet period. They are comparing American politicians, American senators, to members of Politburo, and they are talking about gerontocracy in the U.S. But they consider themselves to be much younger, which is ridiculous. But at the same time, we see that he doesn't have that inner circle he's dependent on. He doesn't have Politburo, or if he because Brezhnev had real Politburo as collective force. He had to talk to Suslov and to Kosygin and to Gromyko and to others and to Andropov. He could not take all the decisions individually. Putin can do that. He doesn't have to discuss as we saw that before the invasion of Ukraine, when he had the Security Council meeting, and most of the members of his inner circle, most influential members of Security Council looked like school kids because they were completely confused and they didn't know what to tell, if they should approve of the invasion or just like they didn't know what was in his mind. So the situation is different because he doesn't have that group of gerontocrats. He is the only gerontocrat in power, and he is going to be there. And he is planning to replace all the rest with the younger versions of them and to live forever.
Thanks. I got more questions to turn to. I just want to make sure, Evelyn or Anton, did you want to jump in at on anything here? Okay. All right, we got a question from Yuri Bender. This is an interesting question. The panelists mentioned that today's elite and the previous one understand the West well and have had links with universities and financial firms. But how well do they understand the Chinese power structure and business elite on whom they now depend? A very interesting question from Yuri Bender. Go.
That's a very good question, and definitely the knowledge of China in Russia is very low. During the last 10 years, I would say starting 2014, Russian big business started trying to make more deals with to be more integrated with China, with India, and in most cases that was not successful at all. Most people like Igor Sechin was the head of Rosneft, was one of the biggest proponents of the real economical and political alliance with China, and we see that his his strategy was not successful. Rosneft is not the champion of the collaboration with China so far, and the influence of Sechin is not that high as it used to be 15 or 10 years ago. What is more important for many Russian bureaucrats, China is extremely scary. There is a huge prejudice in Russia, and we definitely, as we are discussing that Russia is dependent on China, and especially after the beginning of the invasion, Russia has become the servant of China, or they discuss it as well. And for many years, China was viewed from Moscow as the real potential threat. Everyone knows geography. Everyone has seen the map and knows that Siberia is not populated at all, and right across the border there is a huge China. So deep inside, no one says that aloud, but deep inside there is a huge rational and irrational, I would say even racist prejudice against China. It's, in a way, it's not, it has never been articulated within political elite, but it influences a lot of political decisions. Although right now China is the only way to continue getting technologies and getting through, but still that expertise in China is extremely low.
Okay, no, great. Let's see. We have a question from Jan Jacobs. The Trump administration frequently references the future business opportunities in Russia as a reason to engage with Moscow. Would the next generation of in the Kremlin be more open to quote unquote normal business relations with the West? That's a very good question, but that basically, it depends on what you mean by normal business relations. I'm sure every generation of the Kremlin would like business relations if they can continue their kleptocratic ways. I think what the question is getting at is the next generation going to be more open to the transparent style of business that we like to think we promote in the West?
They would love to have normal business relations. That has been Putin's dream for so many years, and I should remind you that 20 years ago, Putin had a concept how to make friends and how to integrate Russia and into the West. And his strategy was to hire most prominent Western politicians as the board members of most Russian huge corporations. He invited Gerhard Schröder, German chancellor, as the managing director of Nord Stream. He invited former Italian Prime Minister Romano Prodi, and then former French President Jacques Chirac to hold the same position in South Stream, another gas pipeline that actually has never been built, but there was a hope. He wanted and he offered Don Evans, former Secretary of Commerce in George W. Bush administration, the position in the board of directors of Rosneft. So that was his strategy, to hire as many Western and American politicians as well. But basically, he wanted to corrupt Western politicians, and in that way to get integrated in Western political elite and to have the normal business relationships with the US. But that's the way how he sees the normal business relationships. He still wants that. So since the beginning of the negotiations between Putin and Trump administration, we have witnessed that he keeps on trying to have negotiations in two parallel tracks. He doesn't want to talk about the war in Ukraine and relationship. No, he wants separately to discuss the war in Ukraine and bilateral economic relationships. And yes, he definitely is not going to stop the war. At the same time, he's willing to have normal business relationships with America. He wants all sanctions to be lifted. He's ready to welcome American businessmen in Moscow and to continue the war at the same time. But if he has to choose war or normal business relationships, definitely he's going to choose war.
Right. So it's normal business relationships, but it's his definition of normal. And you don't see this changing with the new generation. And again, I remind Evelyn and Anton, feel free to chime in at your will. I'm keeping an eye on this. Let's see.
Anton has a remark, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh,
I just wanted a little bit of add a bit of context on China because I was looking at that dynamic for over a decade. So you actually have about 5, 7 years of Russia preparing to pivot to China, only to figure out that you don't actually have the people who speak the language, and the problem kind of became absolutely widespread in 22. We've talked to a lot of people who do business in Siberia, do business with the Chinese, and they actually want to go back to doing business with the Europeans because the Chinese practice of business is much tougher. Russians were not accustomed to it. So basically, despite all the rhetoric, Russia was not ready to pivot, even with China and other partners in the region, India, China, whatever, others who are willing to play there. When it's just China, it's much harder. And I fully agree with Mikhail. The general assumption is that this is going to be a problem long term. Even after Putin is gone, Russia is going to be depending on China. Now it's militarily dependent on China because China has all the chips that are used by Russian forces. You have a back door there to the Chinese, so they know all the information. So there's a lot of risks from security to just geopolitical economic dependency. And this is a worrying situation, even if people in Moscow and other places don't say anything. But this is going to be there for a while.
great. Thank you for that context, Anton. We literally got 3 minutes left. I just want to throw out the last question here from Joseph Schultz, which says, what is the likelihood that a Putin successor would shift toward a rapprochement with the West? Will the ideology of authoritarian Putinism last after Putin? It's a pretty frequently asked and very, very, very relevant question, Mikhail. We got 3 minutes. If you can address that one.
I'm sorry that there was some problem with the connection. Could you repeat the question?
Sure. The question from Joseph Schultz is, what is the likelihood that a Putin successor would shift toward a rapprochement with the West? Will the ideology of authoritarian Putinism last after Putin?
I'm sure that the shift is inevitable, because more or less there is a consensus in Russian elite that they want to go back. They want to go back to pre-invasion of Ukraine. They want to bring back their January 2022. They know that it's impossible. They know that inertia is great, but we saw the level of enthusiasm in Russia in March and April when the negotiations with America started, with almost all of them knowing that was the negotiations were doomed to fail, but still they were hoping that there was a chance of success. Definitely, they want rapprochement with the West. They want because as Anton reasonably said, they have the proof that the strategy of the permanent alliance with China won't be successful. It's gonna be a problem. It's too scary. They want to have the previous direction, Western direction, and that probably definitely it's impossible to say that after Putin is gone, the democracy would prevail in Russia. It's not that easy, but whoever comes is going to try to start another thaw, as it happened after Stalin's death.
Great. Thank you, Mikhail. And that brings us right up to the end. We're exactly at 3 o'clock now. So this concludes our launch of Mikhail Zygar's paper, Russia's Future Rulers. I want to remind everybody you can access this paper at atlanticcouncil.org. I want to thank our panelists, Evelyn Farkas and Anton Barbashin, and I am now signing out. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.